The fall of Earth. The sky tore open like paper set aflame. They didn't come with warnings or demands, just force. In less than a day, the Varnak Dominion reduced Earth's military infrastructure to smoldering craters. They shut down satellites, disabled power grids, and unleashed synthetic drones that hunted anything with a heartbeat outside containment zones. Ava Ramirez watched from the shattered window of her third-story apartment in Phoenix as one of the floating carriers hovered silently above the city, blotting out the sun. The air shimmered beneath it, and anyone who tried to flee was swept up by gravity nets and dragged into processing camps. "They are not here to negotiate," her brother Marco had said. "They're here to own us." He was taken 2 days ago, dragged off by six-legged mech enforcers while trying to shield a group of trapped civilians. Ava hadn't seen him since. Now, the city was silent. No engines, no birds, just the hum of the Overlords. The Varnak weren't monstrous in the traditional sense. They were tall, lean, and elegant, silvery exoskeletons wrapped around organic muscle. Their faces held no malice, only disdain. To them, humans weren't enemies. We were tools, pets, resources. Ava was marched with others into Sector Camp 17, where she was scanned, injected, and marked with a glowing blue identifier on the back of her neck. They told her she'd be assisting with infrastructure repair, like everyone with technical knowledge. They didn't ask if she wanted to help. The Varnak believed humans would simply comply. After all, most did. Shock and fear were powerful leashes, but Ava had seen real fear. In war zones, in collapsed buildings, in triage tents filled with screaming soldiers. What she saw in the Varnak's eyes wasn't fear. It was arrogance. And arrogance was always a weakness. The work zones were harsh. Days blurred into each other as humans toiled under watchful drones. But even in the camps, the fire never fully went out. Ava whispered to others during breaks. She mapped out guard rotations, noticed where the drones glitched. She kept her hands busy and her ears open. Then one night, it happened. A Varnak guard struck a child, barely 10, for dropping a piece of equipment. The crack of the blow echoed through the camp. The child collapsed, convulsing. The other workers froze. Ava didn't. She rushed in, knelt beside the child, shielding them with her body as the guard raised its arm again. "Don't," she said coldly. Her voice didn't shake. The guard hesitated. Its translator clicked. "This unit is inefficient. Do not interfere." She stared into the creature's gleaming, inhuman eyes. "You think we're broken, but we're only waiting." The guard lowered its arm. That night, Ava wrote 3 words in the dirt beside her cot and covered them with a rock, passing the message to a trusted friend. "It begins tomorrow." Sparks in the ashes. The Varnak Dominion ruled through suffocating silence. The hum of their patrols, the drone of the mech enforcers, the occasional loud crack of a human being struck, all were reminders that Earth was theirs, at least for now. Ava Ramirez knew better. The camps were prisons, yes, but they were also fertile ground for resistance. In the shadows, humanity was learning to adapt, to fight in ways the Varnak couldn't predict. It started with whispers. She passed messages under the guise of routine work. Look for the weaknesses in the guard rotations. There's a ventilation shaft near Sector 3's water filtration station. And always the same signature at the end. It begins tomorrow. Tomorrow was always coming. But Ava knew the time to strike was now. Ava's opportunity came 2 weeks after the child was struck. She'd been biding her time, watching for cracks in the Varnak's iron grip, and she found one in the form of an outdated transport vehicle. It was one of the few machines still left in the camp, a relic of Earth's past, pre-invasion. The Varnak had repurposed it for hauling materials, but it was far from flawless. Ava worked in the camp's engineering section, the one area where the Varnak allowed human expertise. She wasn't the only one with a mechanical mind. In a corner of the worksite, a small group of engineers had been quietly sabotaging anything they could. They jammed gears, rerouted wires, and slowly turned the machines into tools of rebellion. That night, Ava moved. She approached the rusted vehicle, its panels glowing faintly under the dim camp lights. She gathered a few parts, wires, a short-range EMP pulse unit, and slipped into the machine's compartment. Ready, A low voice whispered from behind. Ava didn't need to turn. She'd been working with Daniel, a quiet man with nerves of steel, for days. He was one of the Resistance's most trusted hands. Let's light it up. The EMP pulse fired. The vehicle's engine sputtered to life, coughing like a dying animal. It wasn't much, just enough to spark a chain reaction of failure throughout the camp's electrical grid. For a few precious moments, everything went dark. No lights, no surveillance drones, no Varnak. In the darkness, the camp became chaos. Ava bolted for the makeshift comms tower they'd set up in secret. She keyed in the broadcast code she'd memorized. To every human within hearing range, stand ready. The time to act is now. The message was simple, direct, but it would echo across the globe, to every human still holding on to hope. The Varnak wouldn't know what hit them. They assumed that, with their technology and their power, they had crushed any spirit Earth had left. But the Varnak didn't understand the one thing humans did better than anyone else: survival. The broadcast cut off abruptly. The lights flickered back on. Ava barely made it to the cover of a storage crate before the Varnak enforcers arrived, weapons drawn. But the seed was planted. A fire had started, and there was no going back. Burn the chains. The Varnak Dominion thought they had it all figured out. They underestimated one thing: humans didn't break. 2 days after the broadcast, Ava stood at the edge of the work camp, watching the dawn creep over the horizon, painting the sky with a streak of defiant red. The camp had erupted in chaos the night before, but that was just the beginning. The rebellion was no longer a whisper in the dark. It was a roar. The lights in the camp flickered again. Every human in the zone knew what that meant. Ava turned to Daniel, who was pacing by the entrance. "Are we ready?" Daniel's eyes were cold, focused. "We've got the city's grid on a loop. They won't know what hit them." The Varnak had assumed their victory was a given. Their advanced technology, their overwhelming numbers, their ruthless efficiency, none of it accounted for the one thing that made humanity different. For all their power, the Varnak didn't understand how humans fought. We didn't just survive. We adapted. We outlasted. And above all, we fought. The first wave of the resistance surged through the camp's gates, a mix of old and new weapons. Broken pipes turned into spears. Car batteries powered homemade shock rifles. A ragtag group of farmers, truck drivers, and former soldiers, now bound by a common cause, marched forward with fire in their hearts. Varnak drones swooped in, guns blazing. The resistance scattered, but the humans were ready. Explosions rocked the earth as improvised traps, chemical-filled barrels, repurposed grenade launchers, tore through the alien forces. The Varnak were disoriented, stunned by the guerrilla tactics. They had no frame of reference for this kind of warfare. Humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like animals cornered. Ava fought her way through the camp with Daniel and a handful of others. They came across a group of Varnak enforcers trying to restore order. One of them locked eyes with her, its expression unreadable behind the faceplate. Ava grinned. "Come and try," she muttered, pulling out her modified rifle. The Varnak was faster than she anticipated, charging at her with a crackling energy blade. But Ava didn't flinch. She sidestepped at the last second, slamming her rifle into the guard's side. The blow was enough to disable its arm, sending the weapon clattering to the ground. Another Varnak charged from the rear, but Daniel was quicker. He leveled his makeshift gun, a jury-rigged plasma rifle, and fired. The shot was a hit, and the alien dropped like a stone. But it wasn't just the fighting. The resistance was spreading, a fire that couldn't be put out. Every part of the world that the Varnak thought was conquered was now rebelling. In South America, former engineers had sabotaged a transport ship. In Europe, a group of hackers took control of a Varnak communication tower, broadcasting the rebellion's victories across every channel. The Varnak was starting to realize something. They weren't fighting humans anymore. They were fighting Earth. The camp's central command building came into view. Ava's heart hammered in her chest. This was it. The point of no return. "Let's finish this," she said. They stormed the building, breaking through reinforced doors, forcing their way past Varnak defenses. In the chaos, Ava's mind flashed back to the child, the one who had been struck. To Marco, who was still out there somewhere. They would never kneel again. You wanted slaves. You got a war. The Varnak thought they had Earth locked down, their grip cold and unrelenting. But as Ava Ramirez and her resistance fighters blasted through the final barrier of their control, the truth became undeniable. The tables had turned. The Central Command building was a fortress, but not invulnerable. Inside, the Varnak were scrambling to restore order. Communications were already failing. Every human victory, every strike, every message broadcast to the stars had pushed them to this tipping point. Ava stood at the command center's doors, blood staining her clothes, but her resolve was sharper than ever. She glanced over her shoulder at Daniel, who gave her a grim nod. Ready? Ready, she answered. The door exploded inward under a powerful charge, sending Varnak officers flying across the room. Ava stormed through the gap, rifle raised, voice a roar that shattered the stillness of the alien stronghold. Humans don't kneel. Varnak soldiers scrambled to their feet, but they were disoriented. The guerrilla tactics of the rebellion had pushed them to their limits. Ava and Daniel's team moved with ruthless precision. Every corner they cleared, every Varnak they neutralized, was a victory not just for them but for all of Earth. They were taking back their world. The command center was a hive of alien technology, glowing consoles and shifting holographic maps. But Ava's eyes weren't on the tech. They were on the alien leaders. Get to the control core, she shouted over the chaos. The core was where the Varnak had centralized their communication grid, their military command, their entire hold on Earth. If they could take it, the Varnak wouldn't just lose the battle, they'd lose the war. Daniel and the others covered her as she sprinted across the room, dodging blasts from energy rifles. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she reached the control panel. The blinking lights and alien symbols made her head spin, but she focused. This was her moment. She ripped open the panel and began hacking into the system, using the same makeshift tech the Resistance had been building for weeks. The Varnak had no idea how humans could repurpose their own tools for war. Come on, she muttered, fingers flying over the interface. The system resisted at first, but then, success. The core whined, then blinked out. The lights across the facility flickered and died. The Varnak were losing control. A scream tore through the room. One of the Varnak commanders had lunged at her, but Daniel was quicker. His plasma rifle fired, and the alien dropped, silent as dust. The room was quiet. The fight had stopped. The rebellion had seized the heart of the Varnak invasion. Ava took a step back, breathing heavily. She looked out over the room, at the lifeless screens, the smoke rising from the walls. Then she turned to face the surviving Varnak officers, who were kneeling, hands raised in a gesture of submission. She didn't feel victorious yet, just angry, tired, and ready to see this through. You wanted slaves, Ava said, her voice steady. But instead, you got a war. And you lost. The Varnak didn't answer. They didn't need to. They knew the truth now. Ava turned away, the symbol of humanity's strength and defiance. This was just the beginning. Earth would rebuild, and the Varnak would never forget the cost of their arrogance.